Kendra Monroe wasn't supposed to trip on her own heel and crash face first into $1 million glass conference table on her first day, but she did. A deep voice cut through the silence like a blade. Is she alive? Laughter rippled among the boardroom's sharply dressed occupants, but Kendra lay frozen on the floor, her face burning. She pushed herself up, knees wobbling, and looked up straight into the storm-gray eyes of Roman Gallagher, her boss, and, apparently, her humiliating audience. "I'm fine," she muttered, tugging her skirt down and straightening her blazer. "You're Kendra?" he asked, rising slowly from where he sat at the head of the table, tall and broad-shouldered in his custom-fitted navy suit. Her voice came out shakier than she wanted.
"Yes."
Assistant to Mr. Gallagher. "I'm Mr. Gallagher." Of course he was. The Roman Gallagher. Tech investor, luxury hotel owner, and if the internet was to be believed, a millionaire many times over. The man who built half his empire before turning 35. "Well," he said, raising a dark brow. "Welcome to Gallagher and Company." That was 3 months ago. Now Kendra's heels clicked confidently across the marble lobby as she carried Roman's triple-shot espresso and the stack of files he needed for his morning meeting. She'd become the assistant who never forgot a thing. She kept his schedule tighter than a drum, knew exactly how he liked his reports formatted, and always had backup cufflinks in her drawer. But she didn't know much about him beyond the boardroom. Roman Gallagher was a fortress. He hardly smiled. He didn't joke. He worked 12-hour days and sometimes longer. He never brought dates to company events. And he never, ever crossed the line with staff. Still, there were moments. Small ones. Like when he caught her yawning at her desk at 6 a.m. and returned 10 minutes later with a toasted croissant she hadn't asked for. Or the time she'd gotten caught in the rain walking back from the print shop and he gave her his tailored Dolce & Gabbana coat without a word, leaving the building in just his dress shirt. Sometimes his eyes lingered too long when she laughed. But he never said anything. And she wouldn't dare.
She needed the job.
After her dad passed, she'd used every penny she had to keep the house her parents left behind. Her mother's health was on the edge, and Kendra covered most of the bills. She couldn't afford to risk everything over a crush. Even if that crush happened to look like he belonged on the cover of Forbes and smelled like cedarwood and sin. "Morning," Roman said as he stepped into her office, voice low and smooth. She handed him his coffee. "Espresso, 3 shots, no sugar. You have a call with the Tokyo office at 9, and your car's waiting for the Haverton pitch at 11. His eyes held hers a second longer than necessary. "Thank you." She nodded, heart thumping, and turned back to her desk. He paused at the door. "You're coming to the Haverton meeting." Her head shot up. "Me? You're the only reason we haven't lost our minds this quarter. You deserve to be there." She blinked, surprised. "Okay, I'll grab my notes." The meeting was in a penthouse suite above downtown Manhattan, 10 floors higher than she'd ever been. The room looked like a magazine's spread glass walls, crystal chandeliers, and a view that made Kendra feel like she was floating above the city. Roman owned the building. He didn't mention it. But when the elevator opened directly into the suite and a concierge greeted him by name with a bottle of rare scotch, she understood. He was more than a millionaire. He was powerful.
And he was used to a world she didn't belong to.
"So," he said after the meeting, once the clients had left and champagne was being poured, "what do you think?"
She turned to him, stunned.
"You want my opinion?" "I always want your opinion." She looked out the window, then back at him. "They're going to accept the offer. They're just waiting for you to blink first." A slow grin curved at his mouth. She'd never seen him smile like that. "You're good, Kendra." She swallowed. "Thanks." He stepped closer. "I've been meaning to ask." Her breath caught. "Are you free tonight?" She blinked. "Tonight? There's a charity dinner at the plaza. I need someone who won't bore me to death at the table." She laughed. "That's your pitch." "It's honest." She bit her lip, pulse racing. You sure that's appropriate? His voice dropped. I'm not asking you as my assistant. For a moment, the world stilled. Then she nodded. Okay. Yes. That night, a car picked her up at 7 sharp. But it wasn't just a car. It was a black Maybach with butter-soft leather seats and a driver in a suit who opened her door like she was royalty. Inside, a box sat on the seat. A note in his handwriting read, "Wear this." Inside the box, a deep sapphire gown that shimmered like midnight and silver heels that fit like they were made for her. When she stepped into the ballroom, Roman was already there in a black tux, talking to a senator. But his eyes found her the second she walked in, and everything else disappeared. He walked toward her slowly, eyes raking over her. You're going to ruin my focus all night. She laughed, nerves bubbling. Then maybe you should have picked someone boring. Never. Dinner was a blur of candlelight, clinking glasses, and whispered banter between bites. When the music started, he held out a hand. Dance with me. Her heart jumped. Now. Now. His hand was warm, steady against the small of her back as he pulled her into a slow waltz. The room spun around them, but he only watched her. You surprise me, Kendra Monroe. How? You make me forget to be careful. She looked up at him. Why would you need to be? His eyes darkened. Because if I say the wrong thing, I won't be able to take it back. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, as the music swelled and his fingers brushed hers like he was memorizing them, she already knew. Something was shifting. Something dangerous. And something beautiful. The first thing Kendra noticed when she woke the next morning was the faint scent of bergamot and cloves still clinging to her wrist remnants from where Roman had held her hand during their final dance. The second thing she noticed was the envelope sitting on her kitchen counter, slid under her door sometime during the night. Her name was written on it in bold, angular script she recognized immediately. Inside was a single invitation card to the Gallagher Foundation's annual gala, embossed in gold leaf. No assistant had ever been invited before. By noon, the entire 29th floor was buzzing. People whispered near elevators and paused their calls when she walked by. No one said anything outright, but Kendra could feel the shift in the air. She wasn't just the assistant anymore. She was the woman Roman Gallagher had spent an entire evening with, and now she was the one receiving personal invitations to his private events. She found him in the executive lounge, reviewing a set of architectural renderings. He didn't look up when she entered. Is this about the gala? He asked without turning. You sent it under my door. I did. There's no title on it. No +1 either. He finally looked at her. Because it wasn't a professional invitation. Her throat tightened. You're asking me to go with you? Yes. She stepped closer, careful. Why? I want you there. That's not an answer. He set the renderings down. I've spent the last 6 years surrounded by people who only ask questions to get something from me. You don't. You ask because you're curious. Because you want to understand. She frowned. That's not a reason to take someone to a black tie event with a $300,000 guest list. A flicker of tension passed over his expression. I don't want a safe date. I want someone who sees through the performances. What makes you think I do? You wore flats to your first board meeting. I tripped over my own feet, and then delivered a flawless briefing with a bloody knee. She crossed her arms, suddenly conscious of how close they were. You're doing it again. What? Saying things you know people keep in their heads. He didn't blink. Then let me be clear. I want you at my side, not because I need an accessory, but because you're the only person in this building who doesn't pretend around me. Kendra opened her mouth, then shut it again. Wear something that makes you feel like you own the room, he added. I'll take care of the rest. She left without answering. That night, the boutique he sent her to didn't have a name, just a single brass plaque and a door that required a fingerprint scan to enter. Inside, A quiet woman in all white greeted her by name and led her to a private suite already filled with designer gowns and shoes arranged like art installations. The price tags were tucked out of sight. When Kendra hesitated, the woman smiled softly. Mr. Gallagher said to remind you this isn't about cost. It's about comfort. She chose a sleek wine-colored dress with cascading sleeves and a back that dipped just low enough to feel powerful. The heels matched. The jewelry was minimal, just a pair of diamond studs and a thin platinum bracelet that shimmered when she moved her wrist. When she stepped out of the elevator at the gala, the press lights flared instantly. She froze. Then Roman appeared at her side. "You're late," he murmured, offering his arm. "You're early." He looked at her then, not with admiration but with something quieter, something deeper. Worth the wait. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung like constellations, string musicians played from a lofted balcony, and champagne flowed in fountains of gold. Everyone wore names she'd only read in headlines: banking heirs, fashion moguls, international art collectors. Kendra felt like she'd stepped into another world. Roman didn't let go of her arm once. "Why do I feel like everyone's watching us?" she whispered. "Because they are." She glanced up. "Are you trying to make a statement?" He didn't answer immediately. Then, "I've spent my life building shields. Tonight, I'm showing people who I trust enough to stand beside me." She blinked. "That's a lot of pressure." "Only if you care what they think." "I don't." "Then it's not pressure. It's freedom." Dinner passed in a blur of introductions and veiled curiosity. Roman handled it all with effortless control, deflecting invasive questions and redirecting conversations with the precision of a chess master. But every so often, his hand would brush hers beneath the table, grounding her. When the auction began, he leaned close. "There's something I want you to see." He led her up a side staircase, away from the crowd, into a private balcony that overlooked the entire ballroom. The city lights glowed beyond the glass. "What's up here?" she asked. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, velvet box. Her breath caught. "You're not." He opened it. Inside was a delicate pendant in the shape of a key, set with tiny sapphires and a single diamond at the center. "It's the first thing I ever bought with my own money," he said. "I was 19. I kept it in a drawer until tonight." Kendra stared at it. "Why are you giving it to me?" "Because you've unlocked something I thought I'd buried a long time ago." She looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "What did I unlock?" He stepped closer, the distance between them nearly gone. "Hope." Her heart pounded. Then, faintly from below her name, Kendra turned toward the sound and saw a familiar face in the crowd. Her mother's doctor. She hadn't seen him in weeks. Not since the last appointment she couldn't attend because of an emergency meeting. He waved for her to come down. She turned to Roman. "I need a minute." He nodded, but his eyes didn't leave hers. "Meet me back up here." Downstairs, the doctor's expression was tight. "I didn't know you were here," she said, careful. "Neither did I. I came with the donor. We need to talk." Her stomach sank. He pulled her aside. "There was a billing issue with your mother's treatment. Insurance denied the last round. The cost's too high to continue without payment up front." "How much?" $68,000. She went cold. "I don't have that." "I'm sorry. We held off as long as we could." Her mind raced. Rent. Groceries. Her mother's prescriptions. She couldn't lose her treatment. Not now. "I'll figure something out," she whispered. He nodded and walked away. She stood frozen, surrounded by gowns and diamonds, while her world threatened to crumble. And Roman was still waiting upstairs, holding a key she wasn't sure she deserved. Kendra didn't go back upstairs. She couldn't. Not with her stomach twisted in knots and her mother's medical crisis roaring in her ears like a siren. The ballroom had turned suffocating, all the laughter and crystal clinking suddenly feeling like a cruel contrast to the reality that waited outside its doors. She slipped out a side exit, heels clicking against the stone path as she crossed the garden courtyard behind the plaza. Cold air bit at her bare shoulders, but she didn't stop walking until she reached the street. She didn't cry. Not yet. She just needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out how to come up with $68,000 before it was too late. A sleek black car pulled up beside her. She kept her eyes forward. Kendra. Roman's voice was low, but commanding. She turned, startled. I didn't know you followed me. I waited for 20 minutes, he said. Then I checked the security feed.
She blinked.
Of course you did. He stepped out of the car, jacket unbuttoned, bow tie gone. Why did you leave? She shook her head. It's not important. It is to me. I didn't want to ruin your evening. His jaw tensed. You think you could ruin anything I care about? She looked away. Roman, I can't talk about this here. Then get in the car. She hesitated. Please. It was the please that undid her. She slid into the back seat. He followed, shutting the door behind him. They drove in silence for several blocks before he spoke. Something happened. What was it? She clasped her hands tightly in her lap. It doesn't matter. Say it anyway. She stared out the window, the lights of the city blurring past. My mom's treatment, it's not covered anymore. There's a gap. A large one. How much? Too much. Kendra. 68,000. He didn't respond right away. Will she be okay? He asked finally. Not if I can't find money. The silence stretched again, heavier this time.
I'll cover it, he said.
Her head snapped toward him.
No.
Absolutely not. You need it. That doesn't give you the right to fix it. I'm not fixing it. I'm helping. There's a difference? Yes, he said quietly. Fixing is about control. Helping is about care. She turned her body toward him. You think just because you have the money, you get to decide how this goes?
No, he said.
I think because I care about you, I can offer something that might keep your life from falling apart. Her breath hitched.
Why?
Why do you care? He leaned forward, voice low. Because you make me feel human again. She stared at him, stunned. In every meeting, every hallway, every room we've been in, he continued, you're the only one who doesn't flinch when I walk past. You don't try to impress me.
You don't use me.
You just show up. And you keep showing up, even when I don't deserve it. You always deserve it, she whispered. He reached out, brushing her hand where it rested on the leather seat. Let me help you. She pulled her hand away, gently but firm. Not like this. I need to do this on my own. His expression shifted, not hurt, but something deeper. Respect.
Then I'll wait, he said.
For what? For the day you let me do something for you, without fear. The car stopped outside her apartment. She opened the door, paused. You shouldn't follow me again. If you disappear, I will. She stepped out. Good night, Roman. Good night, Kendra. Inside, she tossed the heels aside and sat on the edge of her bed.
She'd meant what she said.
She couldn't take his money, not without changing the entire dynamic between them. It would make her feel owned, even if he never intended it that way. But as she stared at her cracked ceiling, one reality settled in. Time was running out. The next morning, she got to the office early. She'd barely turned on her monitor when Roman's voice came through the intercom. My office. She stood, surprised. He never summoned her like that, not without warning. His door was open. He stood by the window, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, coffee untouched. You're resigning, he said before she could speak. No, I'm not. You're about to. You're thinking of taking on a second job, maybe selling your car, maybe pulling from some fund you swore you wouldn't touch. But you're not quitting. How do you know that?
He turned.
Because I've been exactly where you are. And I know the look of someone willing to burn themselves to the ground to save someone else. She dropped into the chair. So what now? I'm offering you something different. She narrowed her eyes. You already offered to pay. This isn't about the money. He crossed the room, sat across from her, and placed a single document on the desk. An internal transfer. Executive liaison, she read aloud. You'd work directly with me. Not as an assistant. As a partner. You'd attend every meeting, oversee every pitch, manage entire projects. It comes with a pay bump. Substantial. She looked up.
Why?
Because you've outgrown the desk outside my door. And this has nothing to do with last night. It has everything to do with your value. She hesitated. People will talk. They already are. She met his eyes. What if I say no? Then I'll still be at that desk every morning, waiting for you to walk in with your coffee and your fire and your ability to make me forget I am supposed to be alone. She grabbed the pen. He didn't smile, but he nodded. Later that week, she stood beside him in a skyscraper conference room in Chicago, presenting to a room full of men who underestimated her the moment she walked in. They didn't by the time she walked out. He watched her the entire time. That night, she stepped onto the hotel balcony, wind whipping her coat around her. Roman joined her seconds later. You were brilliant today. She didn't respond. He stepped closer, voice low. I want to ask you something. She turned. What?
Dinner.
Not for business. Not for appearances. Just me. And you. Somewhere with real food and terrible wine. She laughed softly. And if I say yes, I'll pick you up at 7. She arched a brow. You don't even know where we're staying tomorrow.
Ido.
I picked the hotel. She paused, then nodded. Okay. He didn't touch her. Didn't push. But when he left, her pulse still hadn't steadied. Because for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what might come next. She was hoping for it. Kendra adjusted the neckline of her cream blouse, glanced one last time in the mirror, and stepped out of her hotel suite. The restaurant Roman had chosen for their dinner wasn't listed on any public directory. It didn't have a sign outside, just a wrought iron gate and a garden path lit by amber lanterns that led to a hidden entrance. A hostess greeted her by name before she even spoke. This way, Ms. Monroe. The dining room was candlelit and quiet, the kind of place that didn't print menus because everything was made custom. Roman stood as she approached, dressed in a dark button-down, sleeves cuffed, hair slightly tousled as if he hadn't bothered with perfection tonight. You found it, he said. I'm still not sure how. I didn't want cameras. Or interruptions. She sat across from him, noticing the absence of any other diners. Did you book the whole place? I asked for privacy. She reached for the water glass, buying a moment. What are we doing here, Roman? He met her gaze. Something real. The waiter approached with 2 plates, no questions, no explanations. Roman waited until they were alone again. You don't like being handled, he said. Because I've had to handle everything myself for a long time. I know. You've built something untouchable, she said, not quite a compliment. His expression didn't shift, but something in his posture softened. I thought I had to. Why? Because when people know what matters to you, they know how to hurt you. And now. He leaned forward slightly. Now I'm tired of pretending I don't care about anything. She held his gaze. What do you care about? You. The word landed between them like a dropped glass. I thought I was just your assistant, she whispered. You were never just anything. She wanted to speak, but her throat tightened. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. I know you didn't want help, he said, sliding it across the table. This isn't a check. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a contract. 1 page. Simple.
Clear.
Gallagher Innovation Fellowship. A personal grant, awarded annually, to one employee who demonstrates exceptional strategic impact. Non-repayable. No strings. The name on the top line was hers.
She stared at it.
This isn't work-related. It will go through the company. You'll be recognized publicly. It's not charity. It's acknowledgement. You created this for me. Yes, he said. But it will exist long after you've moved on. She looked up. You think I'll leave? I think you'll outgrow even me, eventually. No, she said, voice steady now. I won't. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he reached across the table, fingers brushing hers just once. I never wanted to be seen, he said quietly. Not really. But you see everything. She turned her hand so her fingers laced with his. You gave me a place to stand when everything else was falling apart. But I don't want to stand beside you because I owe you. Then why? Because I want to. He exhaled, like a weight had slipped off his chest. I've built towers and brands and empires, and none of it ever felt like enough. But tonight, sitting here with you, this feels like everything. She smiled slowly. Then maybe you should stop building walls and start building something with me. He stood and walked around the table. She rose as well, heart pounding. I've loved you quietly, he said. From the moment you challenged me in front of a boardroom full of men who never speak unless spoken to. She looked up at him. Then stopped being quiet. He kissed her. It wasn't tentative or uncertain. It was deep and deliberate, the kind of kiss that came from a man who'd spent too long keeping everything locked behind steel and now wanted nothing more than to let it all fall away. When they pulled apart, her eyes were glassy. So what now? She asked. You come home with me. Not as your assistant. No, he said. As the woman I love. Later that week, she walked into Gallagher and Company not through the assistant entrance, but through the executive wing. The new nameplate on her glass office door read, Kendra Monroe, Strategic Director. She didn't take the elevator anymore. She took the stairs, heels clicking with purpose, head held high. Her mother's treatment was secured. The foundation announced the fellowship at a press conference, and Kendra stood beside Roman as the cameras flashed. Not as someone protected by him, but as someone who had carved her own space beside him. After the event, he led her to the rooftop of their building, where a table was set for two beneath a canopy of fairy lights. The skyline stretched endlessly behind them. You said you didn't want to owe me, he said, handing her a small box. She opened it. Inside, the sapphire key pendant. The chain was no longer finer, but the gem was the same. I don't owe you, she said, fastening it around her neck. No, he said. You own me. She laughed, then stepped into his arms. Their kiss was slow, honest, unafraid. And when he whispered, I love you this time, she didn't hesitate. I love you too. It wasn't a beginning. It was everything they had both been building toward. Together. The glass doors to the Gallagher Innovation Summit opened on a hush of air and camera flashes. Kendra stepped inside first, her heels tapping against the polished stone, the sapphire pendant at her throat catching the chandelier light as she moved. Roman followed behind her, not as the titan of industry tonight, but as the man who had chosen to stand beside her, not in front. She had spent the last few weeks preparing for this moment. The summit wasn't just another corporate event, it was the launch of the fellowship program she had helped design, the same one that had changed the course of her life. Now it would change others too. 5 new recipients, each with different backgrounds and impossible odds, were being honored tonight. Roman stood quietly at her side as the first round of applause rang out. It was different now how they were seen. Not whispers or speculation, but respect. She hadn't just risen through the ranks, she had redefined what standing beside Roman Gallagher looked like. You ready? He asked under his breath as the host introduced her next. I've never been more ready for anything. She stepped up to the podium, the ballroom going still. Her voice was calm, clear and unwavering. When I walked into Gallagher and Company as a junior assistant, I never imagined I'd be standing here. But I wasn't given this chance, I earned it. And tonight, we honor those who have done the same. This fellowship isn't about charity. It's about recognizing brilliance in places power usually ignores. The audience erupted. Backstage, Roman waited for her. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight into his arms. "You didn't just deliver a speech," he said quietly. "You delivered a legacy. I couldn't have done it without you." "You didn't do it because of me," he corrected. "You did it because you're relentless." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "So are you." He pressed his lips to her forehead. "It's a good thing we're on the same side now." The celebration continued well into the night. At one point, Roman disappeared from the ballroom. When Kendra finally found him, he was standing alone in a smaller adjoining gallery, in front of a photograph she hadn't seen before. It was her. The image was black and white, her standing at a window in the Chicago hotel, backlit by morning light, her eyes focused on something far away. It had been taken without her knowledge, but it wasn't invasive. It was reverent. "This is new," she said, stepping beside him. "I had it commissioned." She turned to him, surprised. "Why?" "Because I've built dozens of buildings. But nothing I've made has ever looked like that, like purpose." She was quiet for a long moment. "You really think this is it?"
Us. No, he said.
"I know it." She reached for his hand. "Then let's stop waiting for the right time." His brow lifted. "For what?" "For everything." The next morning, they flew to Paris. Not for business. Not for optics.
Just for them.
They stayed in a townhouse overlooking the Seine, where the windows opened onto stone balconies and the scent of fresh bread drifted up from the bakery below. She wore his shirts in the morning, bare-legged and barefoot, reading grant proposals while he brewed coffee. He kissed her shoulder without a word and handed her the mug before returning to his laptop. They moved through the city like they belonged there. They didn't rush. They didn't hide. They didn't explain. In Montmartre, he paused in front of a small jewelry shop. "Kendra." She turned, caught off guard by the seriousness in his voice. "I never believed in permanence. Not until you." Her breath caught. "I don't want to make a grand speech or a scene. I just want to ask you something." She nodded slowly. He reached into his pocket and held out a simple velvet box. Inside was a ring, platinum, understated, elegant. The diamond was oval, flanked by 2 sapphires that mirrored her pendant. "Will you marry me?" She didn't cry. She just answered with the clarity of someone who had already known the answer long before the question was asked. Yes. They didn't wait a year, or even 6 months. They married in the garden of the Gallagher estate in the Hamptons, surrounded by only those who mattered. Her mother, healthier now, walked her down the aisle. Roman's sister flew in from Milan, bringing her 2 sons who scattered petals down the aisle in crooked lines. No press. No investors.
No spectacle.
Just love. Kendra wore a gown that moved like water. Roman wore a suit that didn't try to impress. They spoke their vows beneath an arch of white roses, the ocean wind threading through the air like a blessing. "I never wanted to be someone's everything," she said. "Until I realized you weren't asking for everything. You were offering it." He took her hands. "You were the first person who didn't just see me. You challenged me. You made me better. You made me human again. I don't want to be anything without you." They kissed with the sun setting behind them. Afterward, they danced barefoot under string lights, the grass cool beneath their toes. Roman surprised her with a string quartet playing her favorite Nina Simone song. Kendra surprised him with a handwritten letter she'd written the day he gave her the sapphire key. "I wasn't ready to say it then," she whispered, folding it into his pocket. "But I meant every word." They spent their honeymoon in Greece, in a villa built into the cliffs, where Roman never checked his phone and Kendra never wore a watch. They didn't talk about the company, or strategy, or deadlines. They talked about the next 5 years, the child they might have, the trips they'd take, the quiet days they'd protect at all costs. Back in New York, life resumed, but it didn't return to what it had been. Kendra ran the fellowship program full-time, expanding it internationally. Roman scaled back operations, stepping into a role that allowed him to lead without losing himself. They hosted Sunday dinners, adopted a golden retriever named Theo, and took turns making breakfast depending on who lost the weekly chess match. One fall morning, Kendra stood in the nursery, sunlight spilling across the pale, yellow walls. She held a tiny onesie in her hand, brushing her fingers over the soft cotton. Roman stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You ready?" he asked. She leaned back against him. "I've never been more." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Then let's go meet our daughter." Their daughter was born just before sunrise, with Roman's eyes and Kendra's stubborn chin. They named her Lila, after Kendra's grandmother.
She was perfect.
When they brought her home, Kendra placed the key pendant in a small velvet box and locked it in the nursery drawer. She didn't need it anymore. The door had already opened. And this time, nothing would close it again.